Hey, I'm Pastor Stephen. Welcome back to our study in the book of James. We're going to continue talking about having a faith that works. And we're going to look at chapter 2 today. Last week we learned that a faith that listens is a faith in action. And basically we said that having the appearance of faith is not the same thing as having faith. This week we're going to springboard off that idea and discuss our relationships with those around us when it comes to our faith. James finished chapter 1 by saying, if you claim to be religious but do not control your tongue, you're only deceiving yourself, or you're fooling yourself. Right out of the gate, we see that James is pushing us to understand that faith is more than trying to convince others that we are faithful, but it means taking action in our faith. So this kind of thinking, or this is what kind of leads us into what James is trying to address in chapter 2. So we just have one basic point this morning. Faith does not show favor. If we look at chapter 2, starting in verse 1, he says this, "My dear brothers and sisters, how can you claim to have faith if you favor some people over others?" Whether we admit it or not, we often show favoritism in certain people. The church is guilty of this, maybe more than any others. As I said last week, having the appearance of faith is not the same thing as having faith. We often gravitate towards what is easy for us, what is comfortable for us. And when it becomes uncomfortable, when it becomes not so easy or difficult, we tend to shy away from it. There are certain people in our lives that may become difficult to handle, or they might be uncomfortable to spend time with. Yet, this is an opportunity for us to have a faith that works in these situations. James says if you give certain attention or special attention to certain people but not to another, doesn't that show your judgments are guided by evil motives? And he gave this example. He says this, for example, suppose someone comes into your meeting, or someone comes in dressed in fancy clothes and expensive jewelry, and another comes in poor and dressed in dirty clothes. If you give special attention and a good seat to the rich person, but you say to the poor person, you stand over here, or else sit on the floor, doesn't this discrimination show what your judgments, or that your judgments are guided by evil motives? See, what James is trying to say here is that we have a hard time getting out of our comfort zone. And really, for me, being such an introvert, when we try to step out and experience things that are out of our comfort level, out of our comfort zone, we tend to revert back to what is natural, what is comfortable for us. We'll shy away. We stand over in the corner. And in James' day, there was this kind of rift that happened between those that were rich and those that were poor. And when he was talking about in their worship gatherings, when they would come in, if someone was dressed in fancy clothing, if someone was dressed with expensive jewelry, they gave them special attention. They put them right up front. But if someone looked like they were poor and could not contribute very much, they kind of shoved them to the back and showed this discrimination that they had towards them. See, our faith has called us to step out of our comfort zone and out into faith. See, in our culture today, maybe it's not a rich versus poor scenario. It might be where there are certain lines being drawn. And in our culture today, in our world today, this is happening more and more. We see lines being drawn. It's just, I stand on this side, you stand on this side. If you don't believe like me, if you don't look like me, if you don't dress like me, if you don't act like me, you go to your side and I stay on my side, and then we don't have anything to do with each other. See, these sides are being formed. We as faithful followers of Christ must step up and erase these lines. Unite the people back together. See, when James wrote this, there were several that would give special privilege to those who had money versus those who were poor. There was a wedge being driven between these two classes. This caused division and did not bring unity. So if we read even further down into verse 8, James says this, Yes, indeed, it is good when you obey the law that is found in Scriptures. Love your neighbor as yourself. And see, certain people in the church were loving their neighbors as theirself, but they were only loving certain people. And this might be the case with us. If we're going to have a true faith that works, if we're going to have a true faith that takes action, we cannot only show those that we feel comfortable around. We cannot only show those that might be Christians or those that come into where we live or those that we spend time with. We have to take a step out of our comfort zone and reach out into our community to those that we might not gravitate towards, that are a little different than we are. He says this, he continues and says, if you show favor to some and over others, he says, you are committing a sin. When we show favoritism or prejudice, we are guilty of sin. And you might say, well, I'm not prejudiced. I don't show favoritism. Yet, have you ever stepped out of your comfort zone and reached out to someone that is difficult to be around? And we often see this happen in churches a lot, is that we form our own social groups. We form our own cliques. We form our own relationships, and it's us four, no more type mentality, is that we kind of hang around those people and that we don't step out and reach out to people that we don't have a lot of things in common or we don't agree with. Have you ever spent 5 minutes with someone that you don't agree with without arguing with them and just hanging out with them just to get to know them and their side? It is difficult for us as Christians to be around people that don't agree with us. Yet God has called us to be a light to those people. Think about Jesus. Who did he spend most of his time with? Yes, he spent most of his time with his disciples, but who were the disciples? And what kind of example did he place for them? Oftentimes, he would spend times with the prostitutes. He would spend time with the drunk. He would spend time with the outcasts of society, those that were not allowed, the poor, those that were deemed rejects in society. He spent time with them. And the woman caught in adultery, Mary Magdalene, that had 7 spirits, and she was demon possessed, and a harlot, and all of these things. Jesus spent time with them. When we show prejudice or we show favoritism, we are guilty of sin. It is important for us to know that our faith will only work if we understand our purpose. And what is our purpose? Our purpose is to love God and love others. So he continues down. If we go down to verse 13, he keeps talking about a person who keeps all the laws except one is guilty as a person who has broken all laws. And what he's saying here is, if you only love certain people, then you're not keeping the law. You're showing favoritism or prejudice. You're breaking the law. And if you break one law, you're breaking all of the law. And so he says the same God says, so whatever you do or say, remember that you will be judged by the law that sets you free. Then verse 13, he says, there will be no mercy for those who have not shown mercy to others. But if you have been merciful, God will be merciful when he judges you. We need to make sure that we are living out our lives by showing mercy and compassion. Not just to those we feel comfortable with, but those who make it difficult or those we find it difficult to be around or to show mercy. See, faith does not show favor. This means for our faith to work, we need to show love to everyone. So think about people in your life. Think about the people that go to your school, the people at your work, the people that you see on the street corners, or the people that society has kind of, or the culture or the main group has kind of outcast. I'm going to encourage you to take a moment and reach out to people that might be on the edge of society or the edge of the group and don't have a lot of friends or don't have a lot of people to come together. See, Jesus would often reach out to those that society didn't want to have anything to do with. The woman at the well, Jesus went and he sat down and he had a conversation with her, and she was blown away that Jesus, a Jew, a Jewish man, would have anything to do with her, a Samaritan woman, an outcast. Not only was she a Samaritan who was hated by the Jews, but she was a woman, and in those days, men just didn't have conversations with women like that. I know it's completely different than it is today. And that's where it starts, is conversations. And if there are people in your life that don't agree with you, if there are people in your life that don't necessarily believe like you or have the same values as you, sometimes it starts with a simple conversation, just saying, "Hey, I want to get to know you. Let's have a good conversation and find some common ground so that we can just talk things through and show love and mercy and compassion to those that might not be the normal comfort zone for you to go to." And if we want to have a faith that works, we need to have a faith that does not show favor. So thanks for watching. Thanks for tuning in. Next week, we're going to dive into the rest of chapter 2, and I'll see you guys next week.